What if a single letter written almost 2,000 years ago actually held the key to some of our biggest, most modern problems? I'm talking about questions we all have, like, why are we even here? How do we find any real peace? And what does it actually mean to live a life that matters? Well, it turns out this ancient book, the Book of Romans, has some answers that are surprisingly relevant for us today.
I mean, just think about it. We live in a world of perfectly curated social media feeds, and we're constantly being told to hustle harder, achieve more, and basically earn our worth. It is so easy to feel like you're always falling behind, right? That pressure to measure up, to get the likes, to perform, it can be absolutely exhausting. And what about our mistakes? You know, that nagging fear that the failures from our past have somehow disqualified us from having a meaningful future? That feeling that we're just permanently stamped by our worst moments? But this letter, written to a small group of believers in ancient Rome, it offers a completely different way of looking at all of this. It's a message so powerful it has been literally changing lives for centuries, and it offers a path forward for you and me right now.
So let's talk about that inner conflict. You know that feeling of restlessness? That sense that something is just off, even when we're scrolling through endless feeds trying to distract ourselves. The Book of Romans says this isn't some unique personal failing of yours. No, it's a universal human condition that was diagnosed a long, long time ago.
Now, this quote gets right to the heart of the issue. When the author, a guy named Paul, uses the word sinned, he isn't just talking about a list of bad things you did. It's more like he's describing a condition, a fundamental feeling of being off track from our original purpose. And that is what causes the inner conflict and the dissatisfaction we feel all the time. But just diagnosing the problem is only the first part. To really understand the solution, we have to look at the man who wrote the letter himself. His own life is maybe the most powerful case study for how this human condition can be radically, completely overcome. So the author, Paul, he started out as Saul of Tarsus, and he was this incredibly strict religious leader, a Pharisee, who was so dedicated to his view of the law that he actively hunted down the earliest followers of Jesus. I mean, by all accounts, he was Christianity's #1 enemy. But then, on a road to a city called Damascus, he had this dramatic, life-altering encounter that completely flipped his world upside down, turning him into the faith's most passionate champion. Paul's story shows us that his past didn't disqualify him. In fact, it became the very backdrop for his incredible story of redemption. His journey is proof that no one is ever too far gone, and that our worst mistakes, they just don't get the final say in our lives. A total transformation is possible for anyone. So what was it? What powered this unbelievable change in Paul? Well, it was a radical concept that turns our whole modern hustle and grind culture completely on its head. It's a principle called grace. Grace is really simple. It just means unmerited favor. It's this idea of kindness and forgiveness from God that isn't based on a single thing we've done to deserve it. In a world that is built on earning and achieving and climbing the ladder, this idea of a free gift that you can't work for, it's completely countercultural. It's revolutionary.
Let's just compare these two mindsets for a second. The world's way, the grind culture that we see everywhere online, tells us to strive, to hustle, to prove our worth. And this so often just leads to hiding our failures and living with this constant fear of not measuring up. But the way of grace? Well, it invites us to rest in a worth that's already been given to us, to find total freedom and forgiveness, and to live with a deep confidence because we are already loved.
Paul uses this powerful legal idea to explain it all. Justification. I want you to imagine you're standing in a courtroom and you are 100% guilty of the charges. But instead of slamming the gavel down and sentencing you, the judge steps down from his bench, declares you innocent, and says he's going to take the penalty for you. That, in a nutshell, is what Paul says God does for us through faith.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty amazing in theory, right? That's the what. But what about the how? How can we apply this ancient teaching on grace in a practical way, right here and now, in our crazy modern lives?
Paul calls this new way of life a living sacrifice. Now, don't picture some huge, dramatic, one-time gesture. It's actually about the small, everyday choices. It's about making our daily lives, how we act at work, how we treat people, even our thoughts, an act of worship and gratitude, all in response to this amazing grace we've received. Okay, let's get really practical. Think about a stressful environment, like the modern workplace. How do we live this out? Paul gives us some actual steps. First, he says to honor one another above yourselves. That's a radical call to humility in a world that tells you to get ahead. Second, don't seek revenge when someone wrongs you. And third, do everything you can to actively live at peace with your coworkers. This is grace in action.
And what about those difficult people that we all have to deal with? The advice from Romans here is just so countercultural, it's almost shocking. Instead of lashing out with anger, we're told to be patient. Instead of gossiping, be faithful in prayer. Instead of cursing those who hurt you, you're told to bless them. And ultimately, to overcome evil, not with more evil, but with good.
Now, let's be real. Living this way, with such radical humility and grace, it requires an incredible source of security and strength. I mean, where does that come from? Well, that brings us to the emotional climax of the entire letter, the ultimate promise that makes this whole new way of living even possible.
Paul builds to this amazing peak by asking this huge rhetorical question. After everything we've been through, after all of our failures and our struggles, what in the entire universe could possibly have the power to separate us from the love of God?
And the answer is absolutely nothing. Not death, not life, not your anxieties about today or your fears about tomorrow, not your highest achievements or your lowest moments. Paul basically lists every single threat imaginable, both visible and invisible, to prove one point. This love is truly, completely, unbreakable and unconditional.
So that leaves us with one final thought to wrestle with. If you truly, deeply believed that you were held by a love that would never, ever let you go, a love that doesn't depend on your performance one bit, what would you do differently tomorrow?